Hello and welcome to the Learn HTML5 Eduonics course. In this video I'll give you a brief introduction. We'll talk about who this course is for and what it entails. As far as who this course is for, basically anyone can take this and learn something from it. Anyone interested in learning HTML, whether you know nothing at all about HTML or if you're a professional looking to sharpen your skills, this course is for you. We'll go from creating an extremely simple web page with some text and an image all the way to building a fully functional application task manager using HTML5 local storage along with JavaScript and jQuery. Alright, so we're basically going from absolutely nothing all the way up to a fully functional app. So this is an educational course in HTML5. It includes basic beginner HTML, such as lists, tables, paragraphs, headings, things like that, as well as more advanced HTML5 and JavaScript code, so things like geolocation, audio and video features, canvas, and drawing tools. This course has 6 chapters or units. Each chapter has 1 to 7 sections, and each section has a video, and we'll also include the program files for that video and also the document if it's a slideshow video. So we'll talk about core HTML concepts, creating clean and valid HTML5 markup, text formatting, lists and tables, forms and input, div tags, and CSS. Alright, so all the basic building blocks of a website. And again, we'll also talk about advanced HTML5 concepts like the new elements and input types, canvas and SVG features, audio and video, geolocation, web storage and local storage, application cache, and we'll even talk a little bit about HTML5 mobile development. The course will consist of a few projects. We'll have a number of very small section projects that only apply to that specific section, and then we'll also have a project called the Blue Developer Directory, which will basically be a static site which lists web development companies, but we're going to implement parts of HTML5 in the site. Alright, so for instance, we'll have a video. We will use local storage so that it can give you a personal greeting, things like that. And then in the last chapter, or the last unit, we'll be building a daily planner application, which is basically an in-browser task management system which uses local storage. So that's it. I hope you enjoy the course. And
hey everyone, welcome to HTML5 from scratch. We're going to be learning all about how HTML5 works and all the different technologies that work with HTML5 to become a web developer. So this course is going to cover a lot of things. We're going to cover HTML5, we're going to cover CSS, we're going to cover responsive web design, introduction to JavaScript, and how to deploy to the internet. We're even going to cover how to set up Git and use GitHub, which is an essential tool for all web developers. We're going to get into more advanced things like animations using CSS. We're going to talk about and use CSS frameworks such as Bootstrap and Materialize and others. We are going to create several projects throughout the course, small projects to help us learn our skills, and then a bigger final project to build, which will be a professional portfolio with a working contact form that we are going to learn how to deploy using Netifly. And we're going to be even learning a little bit about the back end and how that all works using Git and GitHub. So even if you are knowledgeable about HTML and CSS and even a little JavaScript, this course is going to put everything together, and you will, I think, get a lot out of it. So even though it is for anyone and it's for everyone, we are going to start at the very beginning. So if you have no prior knowledge of web development or coding, this course is for you. If you do know some of the HTML concepts and basic CSS and basic JavaScript, you can feel free to fast forward through some things, skip things altogether, but this is going to be a comprehensive course that will give knowledge and skills on how to put everything together all the way to the final deployment. So HTML was developed by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990. It's short for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's used to create web pages that are displayed on the web. You also can connect pages to other pages with hyperlinks. HTML5 was first introduced in 2008, and then it was stabilized, you might even say standardized, in 2014, and is the newest version of HTML. If you look into the history of HTML, there is some interesting things that happened from 2008 until 2014 that you can learn more about the standardization of it and how it evolved. Anyway, HTML5 uses the basic rules as older versions, but add some new tags and attributes, which makes it a lot easier. It's just easier than ever to create web applications. We are going to learn and use quite a few of the new HTML5 technologies. We are going to delve into learning about some of the advanced things like Canvas and SVG features, using audio and video and incorporating those things into our web page, and even look into web storage and local storage. Then we're going to be using some of the more common new elements like section, fig caption, nav, headers, footers, and then we're also going to be creating a contact form page on our final project and use a lot of the new input types. So here's an example of what the old version of HTML looks like when you begin an HTML page. And it has all the same things that HTML5 has, except it's a little messier. There's just things that we don't have to see anymore. It's not easy to read, it's not easy to understand. So let's compare it to the new version, the HTML5 version, which is a lot cleaner, easier to read, easier to write. So let's talk about some of the different things that you're seeing. So at the top, you're going to have a tag that says Doctype HTML, and that is telling our browser that this is an HTML page. And then we have our HTML opening and closing tag. And we're going to learn that in HTML, we need to have an opening and a closing tag for everything. So what that means is the opening tag is a greater than and a less than and greater than. And then the closing HTML is the less than slash and then greater than. And everything inside of that HTML tag is what encapsulates the HTML document. Then we have to have a head tag, and here's the opening head and here's the closing head. And then we have a body tag, opening and closing, and everything inside the body tag is what you see on the page. So it's what the user will see in the browser. The elements that are inside of the head are not seen on the browser, and I'll explain that when we start doing it ourselves. The things that are in the head are very important, but they're not something that the user is going to see. So for example, this is some information that, for example, your search engine bots are going to be reading to understand what the page has. It's going to have a title, and so your search engine bot will read the title, and then it might even have a description. And when you go to a search engine and you look up you do a search and you find some web pages, you often you'll see the title and the description in the search engine the page, and then you'll know kind of, oh, do I want to go visit this site or do I not want to go visit the site? And that's where this stuff is put in. And then this meta tag here talks about the kind of characters that we're going to be using in this page. You also could have a meta tag that talks about the language that you're going to be using. And then you're going to also add some other things called link tags that are going to help us to link our style sheet to our HTML page. Now in the body, this is where the text and images are going to live, and this is what we see on the browser. And we're going to be learning how to write all these different elements. This is an H1 element, and this is a P element or a paragraph element. And H stands for heading, so this is a heading 1 element. And it's going to show these words with very large text. So H1 is the largest text that we can display. Whereas a paragraph tag is going to display this text as normal text. And there's all types of different elements that we can create on our browser and on our page. Now CSS is something totally different, and what it does is it makes the things that we see on the browser, the different elements, it styles those different elements and makes them more interesting to look at and more pleasing to see. So for example, with CSS, you can make your text different colors, different sizes, you can underline it, you can do all kinds of things to your text, you can center it on the page, you can do some animations to it. You can add, so when you add images to your page, you can center those images, you can move them around, you can make them circles, images instead of squares, you can add shadows to those images, you can add borders to those images, and same with any element. So your styling sheet is going to make your web page look beautiful. Now the cascading refers to which style rule applies if more than one rule matches a particular element. So for example, if at the top of your CSS page, CSS file, you make a rule that your H1 tag or heading is going to be red, then if later on down the page you make another rule that H1 is going to be green, then those are conflicting. So in the cascading version, the way it works is that the green one, the one at the bottom, is going to override the one at the top because it cascades down. So that's what the cascading refers to. And those things will become more clear as we get involved in CSS. A separate style sheet is best practice. So CSS is designed to enable the separation of your presentation and your content. So your content is brought about by the HTML page, but the presentation is brought about by the CSS file. And what this does is it gives you more flexibility, and it becomes easier to work through your coding. For example, if you have multiple HTML pages, they can all follow the same style from that separate CSS file that you created. There is a way to put your style inside the HTML page or inside the HTML file in your code, but it becomes very cumbersome and it just becomes very difficult to read, and your file becomes gigantic and it's difficult to find things and to work with because it's so humongous, and you can't find anything anymore because you've got so much. The other reason it's important is the CSS can help you change the styling for different versions of your HTML. So if you are going to be writing for a mobile phone and a tablet and a desktop, you can use that separate CSS file to denote how you want your HTML to appear on the different sizes. And that gets us right into responsive web design, which is absolutely very, very important for today's climate with all these different devices that everybody's using. And we're going to learn techniques so that our apps look really good on all these different sizes. And that's what responsive web design is all about. And then we're going to do an introduction to JavaScript. JavaScript is a high-level interpreted scripting language. And we'll be building some small applications to learn basic JavaScript and to get some experience with how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work together. So for example, if you're on a web page and there's a place on the page where you can input, as a user, you can input your name, your email, some more inputs, maybe your phone number, your address, and then there's a little button that you can click that says, hey, is this the same address as your billing address? Is this your shipping address? Is the same as your billing address? And then you say click yes. And then all of a sudden, all those inputs that you just put in for your name and email just automatically gets inputted into the other fields without you having to write them in. So that would be JavaScript powering that. Or let's say you're on a forum type of website and you can input some text and some different things, and you're as the user, and you click on a button and you add all that text to the page so that others can read it. So those are all the different kinds of dynamic things that JavaScript offers. So the materials that you're going to need for this course is just a text editor of your choice. So popular text editors are Visual Studio Code, Sublime, and Atom, and others. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. People refer to it as VS Code. And in our next video, I'm going to give you a tour of VS Code in case you decide to use it. You are very welcome to use any text editor, but if you've never used one, you might as well just go ahead and use VS Code, and then your experience and will be the same as my experience. So when we're coding together, it'll be easier for you to follow along. So that's it. Our next video, we're going to be starting to code. See you then. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're ready to start coding. I like to start on a fresh desktop, and begin with a new folder. So I'm going to right click on my desktop and hit new, and then go over to folder, and then we're going to title it whatever we would like. So since we're just doing some practice, I'm going to title this one Coding Practice. You may title it anything that you'd like. Okay, so now that I have my folder, I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code, and you'll see a welcome page, and you can either go to Open Folder right here under the Start menu, or you can go to your file and do the same thing, where you would see where it says New Folder, not File, Open Folder. You would hit Open Folder. And it's going to look on my desktop, and I'm just going to pick. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to pick the folder that I just created, which was Coding Practice, and then I'm just going to select that folder. So it's going to open that folder for us, and that's where our code is going to live. Okay, so here is that folder that we just created, and the welcome page, I'm going to go ahead and just delete it for now, just close it out for now. Okay, so now I have my coding practice folder. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an HTML file. So we're going to click on the icon New File, And most often we will title our initial HTML file index.html. So index.html and hit enter, and it'll open up automatically for us. Okay, so here's our index.html file, and it's empty. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the feature on VS Code where we just type in HTML and we get our little choice, menu choice, and we're going to hit the one with a 5. And now we have our boilerplate. So we'll change the title, and I'm going to say coding practice. And of course you can say whatever you want. Okay. And what I'd like to do next is I'm just going to minimize, go ahead and minimize this for a second so I can go back to my desktop. Now I'm going to go back to my folder, Coding Practice, and now you can see inside that I have a index.html file inside there. So if I open it up so we can see it, and so there's my index.html file, even though there's nothing in it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, and I'm actually going to do it again. I'm going to click on it first. Now that it's selected, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say open with, it should give me some choices here. I can open it up with Firefox, Google, Microsoft Edge. So I'm going to open it up with Google. Doesn't really matter. And that page is going to open up, but there's nothing in it yet because we haven't put anything in it yet. So it's just going to be in our local environment. This is on our own machine. It's like our local server. It's like, so this is how you can see everything that you're going to write. So what I'm going to do is just minimize it a little bit, just make it smaller. And then I'm going to close out this. And now I'm going to go back to my VS Code, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize this a little bit, just make it a little smaller so that I can see both screens. So I want to be able to see my code, and I want to be able to see the browser as well. And then we're going to start coding inside the body, and we'll be able to refresh the browser and then see the output. Okay, so I'm in the body, so let's start with some basic HTML tags. So we're going to start with our header tags. Let's go ahead and start with all of our H1s. So what you'll do is you'll start with a less than, like that, and you'll say H1, and then you'll close it. And then automatically VS Code is going to give you your closing tag. So you have your H1 here, and then your closing H1, and then inside, the cursor's already inside it. So if you just hit enter, then you can see that you can put something inside the tag. Now another way to do it in VS Code is just type H1 and hit enter, and you get it. So you don't have to type all the little greater thans and less thans. So and you don't have to hit enter and separate them if you don't want to, especially for the H1s and H2s and stuff. You're not going to be putting a lot of text inside there, so I usually just leave it the way it is. So let's say my web page, and we can put anything we want in here. And then what I'd like you to do is save it. So you can either go up to File and Save, or it would be a lot easier just to hit Control S. So I'm hitting Control S, and now I'm going to go over here to my browser and refresh or reload the page, and now we see the output, my web page. All right, this is exciting. Okay, so let's keep going. Now I'm going to type H2 and enter, and I'm going to just write some text. This is an H2, and I'm going to hit Control S to save it, and then I'm going to refresh. And then you can see that this text is smaller than the H1 text. Now each browser has their own default styling. So Chrome is going to show this in a certain way, whereas if I had chosen Microsoft Edge, it might look different. It will probably look different. And then Firefox would look different, and every single type of browser is going to have their own default styling. We're going to be overriding all of that when we do our own CSS and overriding some of it, if not all of it. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do all of the different heading tags just to see the differences. So H3, and I'm going to write here's an H3, and then I'm not going to save it yet because I just want to do it first, and then we'll save it at the end. Let's do an H4, and we'll say hello, and then we'll do an H5, and we can say let's say hello world, something different, and then we'll do an H6, and that is it. Those are all of the different H's. Okay, this is it. Okay, now that I've done it, I'm just going to Control S and refresh. So you can see that they all get smaller and smaller as you get to the higher numbers. Okay, so you can choose different headers for this larger text. All right, so let's next do some other elements. So a very common element is a div element. A div element is a container. It's a common element that we use, and it can contain other elements. So let's go ahead and put it in. So div and hit enter, and then I'm going to hit enter again, and now I can kind of see my container. So inside of my div, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple other elements in there. So let's do an H2, and I'm going to say, what are divs? And then I'm going to do next an H5, just for fun. And inside there, I'm going to say divs are used. So I'm basically just going to be writing some text, but at least this text is helpful for you. So when you keep this code, you can refer back to it and, to see what the definitions of different things are. So divs are used as containers. It seems like it's better than just making nonsensical paragraphs of stuff. So divs are used as containers for other HTML elements and help us divide our page into sections. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control S and refresh. And then I can see that I have my div. All right, so there are a lot of other elements that are similar to divs in that they create containers and create sections for our page. And we have some of them are called there's one called section, there's one called article, one called a side. Divs are real common, but it's kind of nice to have the other ones just in case you want to, it's just helpful for you as the developer to see your code and divide your code into different things that are more useful for you. Okay, now why don't we do another one? Let's do a section tag. Section, and then inside our section, let's go ahead and practice doing some other elements. So I'm going to do a paragraph element. So P, and so this is going to be normal text. So I'm going to say this is a paragraph with normal sized text. Okay, and let's do some other ones. How about we try italic? I hit enter, and I'm going to write this is italic. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one called emphasis. EM is emphasis, and I'm going to say this is emphasized text. Okay. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go over here to my file icon, and I'm going to click it, and that's going to get rid of all the folders, and that way I can see more of my code, and it's just a little easier for us to manage. Next, I'm going to do strong. Strong is another element, and that is going to be bold text. So this text, this element uses a bolder or stronger text. Okay. And then finally, what else should we use? Let's do bold. Let's do actual bold. B, there's one for bold. And see if that's different. This is bold text. Okay, so why don't we save and refresh and see what we can come up with here. All right, so we can see that we have our paragraph text, we have our italic, our emphasized, which look exactly the same to me, and then we have the strong and the bold, and again, they look exactly the same as well. So there are different choices, but it seems like they're very similar. You might notice that if you look down the page, everything is, everything is right next to each other, like underneath each other. Everything just goes to the next line, next line, next line, next line, until we get here. Your italic and your emphasized are right next to each other, and your strong and your bold is right next to each other. If I expand this, again, these stay right next to each other. This is by default, these elements are called inline elements by default. So they're going to stay in line, whereas all the other ones are called block elements, which means they're going to go to the next line, next line, next line. So as you learn which ones are inline and which ones are block, it'll help you to decide what to do for your design as you're starting to design things. So quickly, if you were sitting here going, okay, yeah, I want to do some italics and stuff, but I want it to go to the next line, there's a couple different ways you could do it. One is to use CSS, but an easier way is to simply put a break in the ones that are inline. So for italic, I would just type BR and hit enter, and the text editor would give me my closing and my opening and closing tags or brackets. And a break is a single element. It doesn't have an opening and closing. It's just all by itself. And then if I do another break after my M, BR and hit enter, and then I do another one after my strong, BR and hit enter, and then do a final one after my bold, BR and enter. So I've got these breaks. If I save it, it should and it will put these things on the next line. So let's see if I refresh. And then you can see that everything goes into the next line. All right, this is a good spot to stop and take a break. When we come back, we are going to work on some more advanced HTML elements. See you in the
Hello and welcome to the HTML5 video series. My name is Brad Traversy and I'll be your instructor throughout this course. This series includes 5 chapters with 3 to 5 sections in each chapter, and I will briefly outline the chapters in this video. So what do we learn? We're going to learn HTML in full, from basic standard tagging system to the document structure, and then we'll progressively move to more complicated features, and ultimately we'll be learning the new HTML5 features like geolocation and canvas, application cache, stuff like that. So we'll basically be learning everything there is to know about HTML. And along with that, we'll be learning about CSS. We'll learn the standard CSS selectors and methods and syntax, and we'll also learn about some of the new CSS3 features and elements and selectors. And also we'll be learning JavaScript. I know that this is an HTML video, but when you're using HTML5, HTML5 is good for the markup, and the layout and the presentation, but JavaScript, ultimately we need to use some JavaScript to make it work, to process it. So we will be learning some JavaScript. Okay, so in each chapter, in each section, you'll have some program files, and we're going to be building this. Our main project is going to be called the Blue Developer Directory, and what it is it's a static website with some dynamic HTML5 components. We'll start out with just building, say, a table for the site, or then we'll build the contact form when we learn about forms. And then in the, I believe it's the second chapter, we'll start putting it all together and we'll build the home page. And then in chapter 3 through 5, we'll be adding HTML5 elements to it. There are a few sections, I think, such as the canvas section, when we learn about the canvas feature, that we'll be doing a small side project that doesn't have anything to do with the Blue Developer Directory, because there are a few things that we're learning about that I couldn't really implement in this website. So we'll just have some side small projects for those aspects. So chapter 1, we're going to learn HTML from the very beginning. We'll have the introduction, and we'll learn about certain tags, paragraphs, headings, stuff like that, how a HTML document is formed with the HTML tags, the head, body tags. And in section 2, we'll actually build a web page, a one-page website, which will have an image. We'll integrate an image and some tags. And section 3, we're going to learn about tables and lists. And in section 3, we're actually going to start building our list of developers on the Blue Developer Directory. So it'll be a table with developers along with some information, maybe the city they're in, stuff like that. And then in section 4, we'll have the forms and input. We'll be learning about basic form and input. We're not going to touch the HTML5 new input types or anything like that yet. We're just going to learn the basic syntax of a regular HTML form, and we'll probably do the contact form on the Blue Developer website. So some real good foundation work. Chapter 2, we'll be learning more about CSS. We'll have kind of an intro to CSS in section 1. And in section 2, we're going to learn about separating our content with divs and span tags, and getting the document ready to add a style sheet to. And then in section 3, we'll learn in-depth CSS, which will be external style sheets and all of that good stuff. And then in section 4, we will be putting our site together. We'll be putting the Blue Developer Directory website together. We'll build the home page. We'll style the home page, and we will also add a menu structure, and then we'll add the tables and the forms that we created in chapter 1 to the website. So it's going to be really cool to have everything just put together. And chapter 3 is the hard part. It's where we introduce HTML5 and all the new features. Standard HTML is pretty easy to learn. HTML5 has a little bit more of a learning curve because you need to also learn some JavaScript and in some cases some serious CSS. So it'll be a little challenging, but I think that we'll make it through, and we'll explain things the best we can. And section 1 will be a basic introduction of what HTML5 is and what it can be and what it can be in the future, because it's definitely, we're in the beginning stages of it now. So I believe that it's going to take us far in the web development world. And in section 2, we'll have new tags and elements, which will be like the new header, footer tags, stuff like that. And then in section 3, we'll have the new input, we'll have the new form stuff, which is the input type. We have the new email input type, or what else is there? The phone number email, the phone number input type, stuff like that. All the new form stuff. We're actually going to convert the form that we built in chapter 1 into an HTML5 friendly kind of format, so that'll be fun. Chapter 4, we're going to start with learning about Canvas. We're going to make some lines and shapes, and we're even going to do some animation with JavaScript. Section 2, we're going to show you how to detect certain features in your browser to make sure that your browser can do these things, these new HTML5 features. And we're also going to learn basic drag and drop, how to grab something in your browser and bring it over and set it somewhere, which will probably be a side project because there's not really much room for that in the main project we're going to be building. HTML5 media features, which is basically the video and audio new tags, and we're going to be implementing those. We're going to be implementing a video into the About page using HTML5 and JavaScript. Section 4 will be SVG, which it will be about vector graphics and similar to Canvas but different, and we'll be doing some JavaScript with that as well. And chapter 5, the last chapter, we're going to learn about geolocation, which is, you've probably gone on websites where a little tab pops up and asks for your permission to grab your location so they can use it somehow on the website. And that's the new geolocation feature, which is really cool. And we're going to get into that, and we're going to learn how to use it to put where we are on a map. I think we're going to be integrating it into the registration form on the Blue Developer site so that we don't have to input our location. It can actually find it for us and then place it on a map. And section 2 is web storage, which is basically it's gonna replace JavaScript cookies. It'll allow us to put values on users' local machines on their browser, and then retrieve it at a later time when we need it. If you wanted to put like a welcome Bob at the top of the website, it could get the user's name and then display it. And then we're going to learn about application cache, which is all about offline able pages, so we can cache our sites, our pages, so that people can access them even without an internet connection. And finally, we're going to get into the HTML5 mobile development world, and we don't have a project in that particular section because it would just be too much to build an actual mobile application, but we are going to go over it. We're going to go over everything and how you would actually implement it and what it's doing, what HTML5 has been doing for us for the mobile world. So all kinds of information. So that's it. Now let's go start learning some HTML.
Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to work on images. So I would like to show you some different things that you can do with your images. Now this first image, the kitten number one, what I want to do is I'm going to show you how to turn it into a circle. But if I do it in my style CSS, it won't look good because this is not a square. So we need to make it, pretty close to a square so that it'll look like a perfect circle when we put our style in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my folder where I'm going to minimize this and this, and I'm going to go to the folder where the kitten image is. I'm going to open it. And then I'm going to drag it to my desktop. And now I'm going to open it with a text or with a editor like Paint or something. And I'm going to crop it outside of the website. So I'm going to use Paint. and you can use any kind of editor that's going to work for you. Okay, so first of all, this picture's way too big. So first thing I'm going to do is just resize it. So let's resize it. So I'm going to hit resize and skew. So I'm just going to hit resize, and I'm going to go and click on pixels, and it's like in the thousands. So I'm just going to make it something like 300, and then I'm going to keep the maintain aspect ratio, and then I'm going to hit OK. All right, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to crop it so it's more of a square. So let's see, let's hit crop, and let's select just the kitten itself. Whoa, what did I just do? Whoopsie, undo. Select, sorry, I got to use the select button. Okay, so I'm going to just select the kitten and make it as close to a square. I'm just going to eyeball it. Looks pretty good, and I'm going to hit crop. And that's pretty good. All right, I'm going to save it. And now I'm going to drag it back into my folder. Okay, I probably could have edited it inside the folder, but it's okay. All right, now I'm going to close up the folder, and I'm going to go back to VS Code. Get back up, and I wonder, I'm just going to save, and then I'm going to refresh, and we've got more of a square now for our kitten. Okay, now I am going to I think I'm going to take away the height here because I don't think I need it anymore since I edited it already. So I'm going to hit save again, and I'm going to refresh, and it's the same. All right. Oh, well, it's a little bit better. Okay, even better. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my style, and now, oh wait, we got to go back to index because we want to target just this image. If we go and target if we target image element, we'll be targeting both images. So I only want to target this one. So I'm going to have to give it a class or an ID, and I'm just going to give it a class. All right, so here's the image tag. Now remember, this is also a link, so I want to go inside the image element, and at the very end of the image element, I'm going to click my cursor, and I'm going to say class equals, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to say circle image, circle image. Because if there's other images in my web application that I want to make circles, then I can use the same class. So notice that I gave it this special way of typing. This is called Camel Case, and it's very common in coding. If you have two words, you can either do Camel Case, which is doing a capital on the second word, or you could do a just like a hyphen and then image like that. Either one. In fact, I think that's the one I'm going to do. So it makes it easier for you to read your classes and your labels basically. One of the two is really good. Okay, so I'm going to do the dash. All right, so I'm going to hit save, and now I'm going to go target the circle image. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say dot circle dash image. Okay, so what you do to make a circle is you use a property called border radius, and then the value is 50%. Hit save. And there we go. We have a circle image now. Cute. Now, if I change this from 50% to, say, 20%, it's going to look different. Let me show you what it's going to look like. So it just makes these corners curved, but not as much. So 50% is going to make a circle as long as your initial square is a square and not a rectangle. So 50% is going to make it a circle. If I change this to just image and not circle image, so just both images are going to be border radius 50%. Let's show you what that looks like. So this is more of an oval now because it was a rectangle, and this is the square. So you have to make this a rectangle if you want it to look like a real circle. Okay, so I'm going to go back to doing it just to the class of circle dash image. All right. Next, we're going to work on shadows and make our images look more like Polaroids or real pictures that are in 3D. So what we need to do is, and we'll do this for both of our images. So we'll go ahead and use just image as our target. And so this is called border box shadow. So we're going to use something called a box shadow to create some shadows and make it look 3D. Okay. So what we do is we just say box dash shadow, and there are several property or values that you can do to make it look really cool. So the first value is going to be for your I think it's horizontal or maybe it's vertical. It's one of the two. I think it's horizontal. So my first one would be a shadow that's going to go to the right of the image. So if I put, say, 5 pixels, and then the second number or value you're going to put in is going to be for your horizontal or vertical, this down here. So like the horizontal one is going to be over here to the right, and the second number is going to be down here to the bottom here. And let's go ahead and say 5 pixels again. And then the next number we're going to put is to blur it a little bit. And I'll show you what it looks like without that. So I think I'll do 3 pixels. And then our last value is going to be a color. So I'm going to say like a gray. Usually some sort of gray is a good color. So I'm just going to say gray. And then I'm going to hover over it and see if I can find a gray that I really like. So I will go to, maybe bring this down to, let's go to like maybe a bluish gray. And then we'll go over here. And that looks fine. Maybe a little lighter. Okay, let's take that. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save and refresh. And then, okay, so you can see the shadow here. You may or may not be able to see the shadow, but I'm going to make it darker so that you can see it more. I'm also going to change this to maybe we'll make it bigger. Well, first of all, let's just change the color. So let's do that. Oops. Come back. There you go. Why are you leaving me? Please don't leave me. Okay. What? You know what I mean? All right. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, let's make it darker. Let's go down here maybe. Okay. I'll hit save and see if we can see it better. Yeah, now we can see it a lot better. I'm actually, and you can see it here too in the circle. I'm going to make it bigger. So if I make the first value 10 pixels and hit save, you're going to see that the right hand side is a lot bigger. And then, so that's your first value. So that's going to be, I think it's called your, what is it, your horizontal? I'm pretty sure that's your, yeah, I think that's your horizontal. And then this one, I'm going to make that one bigger too, 10 pixels. And yeah, maybe that's a little too much. Maybe I'll do 8. Do this one 8. And then I'm going to blur it some more. So if I make this like 10, save it, let's see what it looks like. So yeah, I like it a lot better because it blurs more. You can see how it blurs the edges. And this one, ooh, it says 18. No wonder it looks so bad. All right. And refresh. Okay, cool. Now there are a few other values that you can look up and do and work with on this stuff. Property value, the values for the property. There is something called, so we've got the H, which is the horizontal, we've got the vertical, we've got the blur. There's a spread radius, it increases the size of the shadow. So that one would be after the blur and before the color. So let's go ahead and add another number here. Let's say 10 pixels and see how it looks different. So it just makes the shadow bigger. It goes around more. See how it goes around the entire thing? So you could do that. And then the color, of course, you can change. And then there's something called Inset. And that changes the shadow from an outer shadow to an inner shadow. So let's go ahead and say, after color, let's go ahead and say Inset and see what it looks like. Save, and so the shadow is supposed to go inside the image, but it's really hard to see inside this image. So it's not going to be good. The only time you would use Inset that would work is if you were doing a solid color. So in fact, let's look at it with our boxes, because actually this will look really good with the boxes. So I'm just going to copy all this and I'm going to stick it in the box and save it and see if we can see anything. Okay, so now you can see that there's a shadow inside the box, if that's something that you'd want to do. And what you can do, I've used the Inset before when I was creating bubbles. I wanted to make it look like a bubble. So it was like white color, like a beige color. The bubble was like a light blue color, and then the shadow was sort of like a whiter color, and it made it look like it had some depth. And so you can play around with that. So for example, if we change this to, say, let's change it to 40, make the shadow 40 and see what happens. Cool. So you can really, play around with all these numbers. And let's change this to, say, 30. And it really blurs it. So yeah, so that's a lot of fun. Okay, so that's what Inset does. I'm going to take this out and save. And then we'll go back to our images and take a look at our images. And I'm going to go and get rid of Inset and hit save and refresh. Okay, and I think you can play around with this a little bit, but I think I'm going to make the shadow a little bit smaller. So maybe I'll make this 8 and save. It's a little bit better. All right, that'll do it. Let's go ahead and stop the video now, and our next video we're going to talk about Flexbox, and we're going to be able to move our images around and have more control over how our images are looking on the page. Hi, and welcome back. All right, in the last video we worked on some styling, and we learned about the 3 different ways to style or to target HTML elements in order to style them. So this video, I'd like to work on creating a border around our element and learn about the margins and the padding properties. Okay, so our div has a class of title. I'd like to change that to something else for now, for this exercise. So let's change it to container. It'll make more sense to us. Okay, so I'm changing the div to a class of container. And what I'd like to do is I'll save that and then go to my style sheet, and let's go ahead and go to the next line and target the container. So dot container, since it's a class, and then we're going to put in our curly braces. Okay, so I would like to put a border around the container. So we're going to use the property border, and then we'll put our colon. And the way we do borders is there's 3 values you're going to put in. The first value is how wide your line, the border itself is going to be. So we can put 5 pixels. And you can make it bigger or smaller. In fact, we'll change it and show you what happens when we change it a bunch of times. Then we're going to hit the space bar, and now we have 3 choices. We can make it a solid border, a dotted border, or a dashed border. Pretty sure those are only the 3 choices. So I'm going to say solid. And then the next value is going to be a color. So we can say black or yellow or whatever color we want. So let's just say gray for now, just for fun. And we need to put our semicolon in. Okay, so if we hit save, we should see a border go around our div when we refresh. And there it is. So we have our div with a border, and it's gray, and it's 5 pixels wide, and it's solid. So if we just change this to say 20 pixels, and we change it to dotted instead of solid, and we change it to a different color, like let's change it to maybe a lime green or something. That's really an ugly green. I don't want to do that color. Let's do more of an aqua or something. Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to save. Let's see what happens. Ooh, very cute. Okay. Okay, let's change it to dashed and see what it looks like. Dashed. And let's make it 10 pixels. Save. And then refresh. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so now let's work on padding and margin. Okay, so this is the border around our element. I'm gonna pull my screen out so you can see that divs have a default behavior where they're going to go all the way across the screen. Okay, so that's your border, that's your element. Your element is going to go all the way across the screen, 100%, even if you don't have stuff over here. So there's things that we can do to change that. We can change the size of our div. So we can say that the width should only be 50% or 25% or something like that. So you can do that. We also can change the amount of space that's inside here, the white space that's inside here, using padding. And then margin, we can change the amount of white space that's outside of the box. That's called margin. So let's go ahead and play with that a little bit. I'm going to go back to VS Code. I'm going to actually leave this big right now so we can go back and look at it. So the first thing I'd like to do is mess around with margin. So let's say margin, and we'll put a colon, and let's say 50 pixels and put a semicolon and hit save. So what that's going to do is create some extra white space around the box, on the outside of the box. So I'm going to refresh, and you can see now we have 50 pixels around all sides of the box. All sides of the box. That's important. If you only want to have that space between the top, or maybe just the bottom, or maybe just the left, or maybe the right, you can specify that. So if I go back to this, so if I say, let's say I just want to do 50 pixels on the top, I would say margin dash top, and I'll save, and that's just gonna give me space on the top so that you can see now on the sides and the bottom it's not 50 pixels. A lot of times you're going to want to do top and bottom. So let's see, margin top, margin bottom. If you do this, if you go back to just margin, oops, and the first number, I believe, we'll find out in a second, I believe the first margin is top bottom, the first value, and the second value I believe is right left, but I could be wrong, so let's find out. Let's say 5 pixels for the second value. Hit save, and okay, so that is, I think that's what I said. So the 50 pixels is on your top and your bottom, and your 5 pixels was on your right and your left. So if I center this a little bit better, you'll be able to see. So that's how you can target those. And if you wanted everything to be different, you could put 4 different values, and it would be top, I think it would be top, right, bottom, left. So let's go ahead and find out if that is true. So let's say 5 pixels, and let's say 0 pixels. Okay, so I think it's top, right, bottom, left. So let's save and see if that's correct. Okay, so the top was 50. The right was a little bit more than left. Is that what I said? Top right was 5 pixels, whereas the left was 0. Yep, and the bottom is 25. So yeah, that's how you do it. So you just kind of go in a clockwise fashion to put a value for all 4 sides. Okay. Or you could, if you want to just do bottom, you could say margin dash bottom, and you could have just one value there. So there's lots of different ways you can do it. And you can find all this information on, you know, different internet helpers like W3 Schools or MDN are good places where you can find all those special details of all your CSS style values and the syntax and everything. I mean, you can't possibly memorize everything. So the things that you use a lot, you'll memorize, but don't worry if you can't memorize everything. I mean, I don't have everything memorized, obviously. So, okay, that's our margin. So now let's talk about padding. So padding is going to be the same kind of thing, except it's going to be inside the box. So let's say we want 30 pixels of padding inside the box. And if you look at it the way it is right now, when I refresh, notice that we're going to have more white space inside the box around these words. Okay, so we are having whatever I said, I think it was 50 pixels or whatever it was, inside here, and here, and here. So let me go back and see what I put. Oh, 30 pixels. I put 30 pixels. And you can do the same thing where you can have different padding, so we can put more values in. So let's do 5, and then 30 again, and then 5 again. That doesn't make sense. We could just do 35. So let's change it to 0 and maybe 10. I don't know why anyone would do this, but maybe they would. Okay, so we have 4 different values. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, so our first value is the 30, and then the second value, it doesn't really matter the second value because there's so much space anyway. The third value was 10, so let me go back and look. So we have the 10 right here, and then the fourth value is 5, and we have 5 right here. So if I change that fourth value to say 35, save and refresh, so you can see that we have now 35 on the left side. Okay, so that's what the padding and the margin do, and that's super fun to use to, you know, to create some nice styling. And you'll be using those properties quite a bit. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this video. It's a good place to stop. In our next video, we're going to start, we're going to work on just many different properties, so you can get an idea of all these different properties that you can use to style different things. So we'll see you in the next video.
Welcome to Chapter 1, Introduction to HTML. In this section we're going to discuss what HTML is, what it's used for, and we're going to discuss some of the core concepts of HTML, including tags, other elements, as well as attributes and styling. Okay, so what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the language that your browser reads. Whether you're using Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, all browsers read HTML pretty much in the same way. One thing that can be misunderstood is that HTML is not a programming language. A programming language allows you to describe some sort of process or calculation. HTML is more of a way of adding context and structure to text and other content. It's physical. It doesn't perform calculations. The World Wide Web Consortium creates the standards of HTML. There's HTML, XHTML, XML. This series is going to focus on HTML5, which is the newest version. Alright, so the syntax of HTML is pretty simple. It's fairly easy to learn, and I'm sure some of you already know this stuff, but HTML uses a set of tag elements, and the idea is to wrap the content in the tag, and the tag will then format the content how you want it to look. For instance, here we have, this is a heading wrapped in an H1 tag, which is a heading tag, so this would be, by default, it would be a large heading. And this is a paragraph, would just be standard paragraph text. Now you can change the size and the look of the headings and paragraphs through CSS, but your browser also has a default setting, a default font size for headings and paragraphs. So this is a standard, probably the most simple website you'll ever see, but it is actually a complete HTML document. So what I'll do is go through this, what we have here. First of all, we have the Doctype, and it's very important that the Doctype is the first element on the page. This is not a tag. The Doctype is not a tag. What it does is it's an instruction to the web browser about what version of HTML the page is written in. If this was XHTML, you'd have something different here. You'd have the XHTML Doctype. So that should always be number one. Next we have the opening HTML tag, which obviously we need. It's the top tag always. I don't think you'd ever have anything above that aside from the Doctype. And next we have the head, and inside the head we have the page title. We have the opening title tag, the title, and then the closing tag. Now the page title would usually show up on either the tab of the browser when you're on a specific page, or in the top bar of the browser. This wouldn't be displayed only in the actual inner page, but this is very important, mostly for SEO reasons, for search engines, because this is what shows up when your site pops up in Google or Bing. So it's important to optimize these titles, but that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. And next we have the closing head tag, and after the head we have the body, which is obviously the inner, the main content of any website. And obviously in this we only have just a small paragraph. Obviously there'd be a lot more in here. We just have a hello world wrapped up in a paragraph tag just for show. And then we have the closing body tag, and then finally we have the closing HTML tag. So all HTML tags are either block elements or inline elements, and I'll explain this a little more when we actually build our web page. But basically, a block level element, it creates a block of content. It creates a new line before and after it. An example of a block element would be a paragraph. Now, if you have a paragraph, if you have text wrapped in a paragraph, then there won't be anything before that on that line or after that on that line. It starts a new line always. Now, H1 through H6 headings also are block elements. Forms, you have div tags, which are block level. All of these would create a new line, which I'll explain more when we're actually doing our project. Alright, so inline elements, they don't create new lines like a block level element would. So you can have, say, an A tag, which is an inline element, run alongside of another A tag, and there would be no space, there'd be no line break in the middle. They could be on the same line. So that's an inline level element. We have the A tags. The bold tag is an inline element. Input tags. And input tags actually don't have a closing tag, which I'll explain very soon. Span tags are also inline. So all tags have attributes, or can have attributes, and there's a number of different kinds of attributes. We could have the width or height as an attribute, the style, And as we have here, the href attribute, which is a URL. And most attributes, if not all, are in a name value pair separated with an equal sign. So here we can see the attribute name is href and the value is http google.com, which is the link. And just like before, we have the text wrapped in an a tag, which is a link tag, and we have the text Google. So what this would look like in the browser would just be the word Google, and you could click on it and it would be a link. So attributes, they basically just provide additional information about a tag or an element, and attributes are always specified in the start tag. They're never put in the back, in the ending tag. So we have some other common attributes. The style attribute is a big one. The style attribute will allow us to design the layout and the look of our page, of certain elements on the page. And here we have an example. We have a p tag, which is a paragraph tag, wrapped around the text. This paragraph will be red. And we have the style attribute, which is the name, and then we have the value, which is color red. Now this is a selector. This is a style selector color. There's many different kinds. There's background color, there's width, height. We'll get into that in a later section. And here we have the ID and class attributes, which will allow us to select a certain element, and these are usually used either for JavaScript or CSS. If you have an external style sheet, you can connect an ID or a class to an element. Here we have the p tag and we have the ID my paragraph. So we could style this in a CSS style sheet by just defining this ID and then the properties we want to attach to it. The title attribute, it just adds extra info about the element or tag. And this, in most new browsers, will be displayed as a tooltip if you hover over it. Like right here, we have a link and we have the title to go to some site. So this would be a link, and when you hover over the link, a tooltip would pop up and say click to go to some site. Singleton tags are tags that do not have a closing tag. They can also be called void elements. An example of a singleton tag would be the image tag, the img tag. This right here, img open tag, img close tag, is wrong. Only the opening img is needed. And this is usually used, or always used, with attribute only tags such as image. They can use a trailing slash in HTML. If you're writing XHTML, then the trailing slash is required for it to be valid. But HTML, HTML5, you do not need it. It's usually not used, but it doesn't hurt your document if you do use it. And here we have some examples of tags without a trailing slash. We have the line break, the horizontal line, image, command, and this is what they would look like with the trailing slash. And once again, if you're using XHTML, which is not covered in this tutorial, this is how you would do it. So images on an HTML page are defined by the image tag, the img tag. And as we talked about in the last slide, the image tag is empty aside from its attributes. There's no content in between and there's no ending tag. It's strictly just the img with the attributes. And the most important attribute which is needed is the source attribute, which is abbreviated src. And what this does is it points to the physical location of the image you want to display. And you could use an absolute path like this, which is the entire URL, or you could use a relative path depending on where your HTML file and your image file is on your server. And another needed attribute is the alt tag. Let's make this lowercase. the alt tag, what it does is gives it a text title. It differs from the title tag, as it's not a tooltip. When you hover, it doesn't hover over as a tooltip. But what it does is, if your image is not found, say your image isn't there where it should be, this will display. So say you have a logo. You might have a logo on your web page, but if for some reason the server can't find the logo image, you could actually just have your company name as the alt tag, so that it would display the name as opposed to just being blank or anything like that. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is separating and styling your HTML. You can style your elements with the style attribute, which is what we're going to do in this chapter. Next chapter, we're going to introduce CSS, which is cascading style sheets, where we would have an external file to do all the styling, selectors, and so forth. CSS is actually preferred, but for this tutorial, for simplicity, we're just going to use the inline style attribute. And what we can use to separate certain blocks of HTML, we can use the div tag or the span tag. And the biggest difference between these is the div is a block level element and span is inline. And here we have an example. We're using the div tag and we're using the style attribute, and then we have the selectors and the values. So we have padding, which is 5 pixels. We're going to have, first of all, what we have here is an H1 heading and a paragraph. Very simple, and it's wrapped in the div tag with padding of 5 pixels, a background color of black, and color of white. So what this means is this block right here, first of all, is going to have a padding of 5 pixels. So it's going to have 5 pixels on each side of it, a space with 5 pixels on each side. And the background color of the entire div will be black, and the color is actually the text color. So the H1 in the paragraph will be white text. And I'm going to get into this very soon when we start our first project, our first small web page. So here are some common style attribute selectors. As I showed you in the last slide, we can have the color selector of red, which would make the text red. Background color, make it blue. Background image, we could actually have an image as the background, and you would just put the location of the image, either absolute or relative. Padding, 5 pixels, which is the space around it. And margin is similar to padding, but there is a difference, and I'll get into that in a later section. And display block, we could also have display inline, we could have display none, which would hide it altogether. And here we have some border selectors, border style, color, and width. Now the shorthand way to do this, we don't need to have 3 selectors here. We can actually have one called border, and then just add the values of each of the style, the color, and the width. So we've covered the basics of HTML syntax and the tag structure. In the next section, we're going to create a project that'll implement all the techniques that we've learned. Alright, so now that we've discussed the basics of HTML, I want to actually jump in and get our hands dirty a little bit and do some HTML programming. You'll see here I've created a small project, and it's just a single web page with all the elements that we've talked about, a heading, paragraph, image tags, styling, title, page layout. So we're going to jump into this now, and you should have these files. You should have the project files, and this is actually located in chapter 1, section 1, and this here, fave pick done, is the finished product. And right now we're just going to recreate this. Now, one of the things that we need to discuss is the editor that you're going to use, which is extremely important. You should use something that you're comfortable with. But for HTML and CSS, we don't need any complicated environments. We could actually use just Notepad, standard Notepad. What I would recommend is Notepad++. It just offers a little more developer-friendly tools to use. So you can download that. Just Google Notepad++. I'm not sure the actual URL, but it's free and it's really easy to use. So that's what I'm going to use for this particular series. Alright, so what I want to do now is create a new file. Let me close this out. I want to create a new file to work with. Now you'll see we have the favepik done HTML file. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it index.html. Let me just do that real quick. Oops. Save as, and you should save the project before you even start. So I'm going to save it to the same folder, chapter 1, section 1, and we're going to name it index.html. So the reason for this, naming it index.html, is so that you don't have to actually type the file name in the browser. So if we had mysite.com/favepik, if we don't want to specify favepik.done.html, then if we name it index.html, the page will load. It automatically loads index.html. So that's why I'm naming this. I mean, it's just, if it's going to be the actual page that you want to load automatically, then you want to name it index.html. So now I want to start the actual code. So we have index.html. Now what we want to do now is just open the index.html in the browser. So I'm going to open it with Chrome, and you can use IE or Firefox or whichever your preference. And the first thing that I want to do, that we have to do in any HTML document, is define the doc type. So we just want to define the doc type, and we want HTML. If we were using XHTML or something else, this would be different. XHTML doc types are a lot longer as well. So that's the first thing always. And the second thing will be the HTML opening tag. Now you can type as you go the tags, or you can do what I like to do and just close every tag you make, every opening tag, close it right away. That way you don't have any errors, any mistakes in the format. And the next thing we want to do is the head. So we want to open the head tag and close it. And in the head tag, we can do a lot of different things. You can have meta tags, keywords, all kinds of scripts or links to CSS or JavaScript files. But in this project, all we're going to have in the head is the title. So open it, close it. And sometimes I'll leave it on the same line if it's going to be a short amount of content in the tag. So for the title, we're just going to have favorite pick. Now I'm going to save this and go back to the browser, and this is the index.html page, you can see, and reload, and you'll see there's nothing in the inner area here. That's because our content that we have right here is in the head, and in the head is the title, and the title shows up here in the browser bar. I mean in the browser tab. The title is very important for SEO reasons. If you want to, rank well in the search engines, the title is what people will see when you come up in the results. So I mean, that's a whole different topic altogether, but just something to know. So what I want to do now is I want to view the source. This is the browser page, the presentation page. I want to view the source through the browser, which could be different depending on which browser you're using. I'm using Chrome. In Chrome you go to Tools and then View Source, and you'll see it's the same thing, and it shows the raw HTML. So it's really good if you want to troubleshoot, and if you missed some closing tags or anything like that. So we're just going to leave that open, and then we're going to continue to add HTML to our document. So after the head, we need to have a body. So opening body tag, closing body tag. Now the body is this, is the inner browser. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add a heading tag, an H1 tag. Now I think I mentioned this, but heading tags go H1 through H6, and H1 being the largest, H6 being the smallest. So we're going to have a heading, and we're going to call it favorite pick, just like the title. Close it, save. I'm pressing Control S to save, just so you know. Now to reload, and there's our H1 tag. And the size of this is determined by the browser because we have no style attached to it, no custom style. So most of the browsers, it's about the same size, H1 through H6. So next we're going to add the paragraph, and if it's a paragraph or something that has a lot of content, I usually have it on its own line. So I'll put the paragraph here. And you can see how I'm indenting. Inner tags have an indent. So for the paragraph, let's see. And you can just write anything here. It's not, the content's not really important. It's just the format that we're looking at. It's bright and strong. Alright, so that's in the paragraph tags. I'm going to save, reload, and there's our paragraph. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is add the image. And the image is a singleton tag, as I explained earlier. So it doesn't have a closing tag. We're just going to have the img, and the main attribute is source, which points to the image file, wherever that may be. For us, it's actually in the same directory as the HTML file, so we don't have to use any folders or anything like that. So we're just going to put the name of the pic, which is favepik.jpg. Now if you had a folder here called images, and you had the image in the folder, you would add the images folder to the file name, to the source. And the next thing we want to add to the image tag is the alt, and I'm just gonna put my favorite pic, and then we close it. We don't close, I mean we close the head tag, the beginning tag. There is no ending tag like this. That's wrong. And if this was XHTML, which it's not, we would add the slash like that. So we'll save that, Control S, save, reload, and then we have the image. So as far as markup, as content, we're pretty much done. What we want to do now is separate the parts we want to style and add the selectors, the CSS, to whatever we want to add it to. The first thing I'm going to do is take basically everything and wrap it in a div. So I'm going to put a div right here, an opening div tag, and then a closing one after the image, because this will give us a div tag with everything you see inside of it. And I'm going to do some indenting just to make it more presentable. So we have all that wrapped in a div. I'm going to save it, and you won't see any changes yet because there's no style attached to it. It's just a tag. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is add style to the body. So we're going to add a style attribute. And, excuse me, I need to drink some water. So for the style, we're going to add a margin. We're going to cut the margin out. Automatically it adds margin to the body. You can see here it's not flush up against the browser. So we're just going to put margin 0, save, I'll reload, and now you'll see it's flush up against the edges. The next style property I want to do is the background color of the entire body. So we're going to do the background color selector, and we're going to make it gray. Save, reload, and now we have the entire body is gray. And now I want to make this text, I want to change the color of the text to make it white. So we're just going to use color. Now I could just do white, that works. I'll save and reload. But if you want to, usually if you want a more specific color, you would use the hexadecimal value for it, as opposed to just writing the color, because I mean there's only so many colors available as text. So if you want, right here I'm going to use the hexadecimal value for white, which is 6 Fs, and I'll save it, reload, and it's white. Now I could change this to the black hexadecimal value, which is 6 zeros, save, and it's black. And then there's others like 6 Cs is light gray, but we're going to keep it white. Okay, so now what we want to do is style the we want to add some style to the div, which is the entire thing, the entire page. And the only style we're going to give to that is going to be a width of 750 pixels. And the reason I chose 750 pixels is because that's how big the image is. So I want the whole thing to end where the edge of the image is. Now I'll save that and reload, but we won't see any changes because we didn't add anything except the width. And now what we want to do is add to the heading. We want to add style to the H1 tag, and we want to zero out the margin like we did to the body. I'll reload, and you'll see now there's no top space. And I do want to add a padding. Actually, I'll do the background color first. So the background color of the heading is going to be a hexadecimal value for a purplish color, which will be 53324D. Semicolon. You always need a semicolon in the middle separating the selectors. Save, reload, and then you'll see we have the background for the H1 tag. Excuse me. Now what we want to do is add padding to this, because you'll see the H1 tag doesn't have much space. It has almost no space between the edge of the purple and the heading text. So I'm going to add a padding of 5 pixels. Save, reload. Now you'll see this, it looks much better. There's more space and it looks much more clean. Now the difference between padding and margin, I can show you right now, is that padding is from the edge of the text here, the edge of the text to the top of the div. That's the padding. Margin would be from the edge of the div out. So let me just show you if I added a margin of 30 pixels. Save. A margin of 30 pixels to the heading, you'll see it's from the outer edge out. Padding, I'll just add 35 just to show you. Padding is the inner spacing. So that's the difference between margin and padding. Put those back. Okay, so the next thing will be the paragraph. And you can see there's a lot of space between the paragraph. I want to margin that out. I want to zero that margin as well. Save, reload. Alt. I forgot the style attribute. Haven't done that in a long time. Reload, and now you see the margin's gone. I do want to add a background color of black. I'll use the hexadecimal value. Reload. what's going on here? Oh, quote has to be on the end. Save, reload. Now we have a black background. Now I do want to add a little bit of padding to that too. So I'll do padding 5 pixels and save, reload, and now we have the padding. So it's really taking shape, and we did it in a very small amount of code. And next we'll be talking about, welcome to section 3. Section 3 we're going to be talking about lists and tables. So what are HTML tables? The tables are very similar to an Excel or other spreadsheet type of document. Tables are a great way to organize data into a tabular form. Tables help you see and process a great deal of information in a summary that's readable and efficient. Tables are also a great method to compare and contrast different types of data. Now, at one time, tables were used for the design and layout of web pages, which is now considered very bad practice. You should use CSS to format any type of design or layout. Anything like sidebars, headers, footers should all be done using CSS styling. Okay, so here I've created the basic building blocks of a table. This is the bare minimum. There are some other tags such as T-head, T-body, T-footer if you want prominent headings in each row and so forth. But this is what's needed to produce a table. And you'll see it uses HTML tag syntax just like everything else we've discussed. I have an image here that represents what this code would display on a web page. So you'll see at the top we have the opening table tag and the closing table tag at the bottom, and in between there we have some TR tags, which is table row. Okay, now we have 3 sets of table row tags, and we have 3. I apologize for this being off center. It's just a quick representation. So you'll see we have 3 table rows, 1, 2, 3, and in each table row we have 3 TD tags, which is a table column, but TD stands for table data. I know it would be more helpful if it was TC, but it's TD. So you can see here we have 3 columns as well. So that's pretty much the basic building blocks that you need to create an HTML table. And in the next project we'll be doing more advanced tags and syntax. So now let's talk about lists. Lists are used to group together related pieces of information, which tables also do. Lists are recommended for smaller amounts of data. If you have hundreds and hundreds of records, then a table would definitely be the way to go. If you want to display, I don't know, a list of websites on your site, then you would use a list. Lists are also good for ranking data. We have unordered lists, and then we have ordered lists, which include the numbers. Each item would have a number, so it works out well for ranking data, different types of data. Lists are also used for design and layout formatting. A list, most of the time, it's probably 90% of the time, a web developer will use a list for a menu. Most menus you see are unordered lists or even ordered lists. Even the menus that are horizontal, they're just styled to look a certain way. So lists work out very well for design and layout formatting. Even images, a lot of times I'll have a set of 3 images I want displayed across a website, and I'll put each image inside of a list, and I'll just float it, and it's a nice horizontal layout of images. So it can be used for many different types of layout and formatting. So here we have a layout of the list syntax, which is very simple. It's a lot easier than a table. There's a lot less to it. So we have 2 types of lists here. We have an unordered list and an ordered list. And the only difference between between these two is an ordered list has numbers and an unordered list has bullets. You can remove them. You can remove the bullets through CSS styling if needed, and it's pretty much it's pretty easy. There is one other type of list, which is a definition list, which allows descriptions for each item. I'm not going to get into that right now, but these are the most common. Well, unordered lists are the most common, is what you would use for any kind of horizontal menu or anything like that. Alright, so now that we've got the basics down as far as tables and lists, I'd like to implement a project that will allow us to build on both elements. This is part of a project we created for this series. It's a web developer directory that we can build on through future projects. This particular page lists developers from certain states in a tabular layout. Not only that, but we have these lists on the side that we can create. Now we have this page done in the project files. If you want to go to chapter 1, section 3, project files, you'll see there's a folder with the done page, which is this page. And in the parts folder we have the page body, and then we have the tables. Now the page body is a setup for us to begin with. I'll open that right now, and this is a basic outline of the site. So we have our HTML tags, our head, our title tag, which is find developer, closing head, body I added some style to. Actually, when we open this, actually, you know what? First thing you want to do is copy all this, copy everything, and then let's create a new file right here. So I'm going to new text document, and let's just call this, you know what, let's just call it index.html like we did on the last project. And then we'll open that up, and then we'll paste from the page body, and then save. Now if we open that up, open it with a browser, just go to open with in whatever browser you use, and this is our page right here. So now we can work on this. So as I was saying, we have the body, we margined it out, we have a background color of blue, dark blue, color of white for the text, and the H1 is going to be our header, and the H1 is margined out, has 5 pixels of space, background color is very dark gray, and color's white, and that's the H1 tag. Now what I have here is one thing I didn't explain in the last section was the comments. These are how comments are laid out in HTML. You have the less than sign, and then you have the exclamation, 2 dashes, and then you can write whatever you want in the comment section. And what I've done here is I have some div tags, and I like to label the start tag and the end tag, especially if we're not using IDs or classes. It's just a div tag. So this is going to be the main div. Let me just show you on the finished site. The main div is going to be everything here, both the table column and the list. Then we have the left div, start. Everything in between here, these two divs, is going to be all this on the left, which is the tables. We have 2 tables. And then we have the right div, which is the lists. So what we'll do is we'll set the left div to a width, I think it's 500 or something like that, and then we have the right div, which will be I think it's 200. And in the middle of the 2 lists we have an HR, which is a horizontal line, and you'll see all I have is comments. I just have comments in the place of where the tables and lists will go. So, and then the right div ends, and then the main div ends, and then that's the end of the document. So let's get started. So the first thing, one second, the first thing that I want to do is add the actual content. We'll do the styling after. So just go here for a second. So first of all, the first thing that I see is the header. This Boston Developers, and that is an H4 header, I believe. Let me close this. That's an H4 heading. So I'm going to replace the comment that says heading with an H4 heading that says Boston Developers. In case you haven't noticed, I'm from Boston, from the Boston area. So the next thing we see, so what I'd like to do first is to add the actual content and then add the styling. So we'll see, you can see right here we have a heading, which is this heading, Boston Developers. Then we have a table, Table 1. And then we have another heading, New Hampshire Developers. And we have another table. So that's what we're going to do first. Let's add the heading. Just replace the heading comment with the H4. Open and close, and then in the middle, Boston Developers. Okay, let's save that. Let's go to our document, reload. Actually, you know what? See this line? This HR is going to get in the way until we actually do some styling, so I'm going to remove it. Save. Alright. So, I'm going to work on the new document, but I'm going to use the finished document as a reference. So now, you know what? Let's add both headings. So this will be New Hampshire Developers, and you'll see that you'll see that our headings here. Hold on, let me just save this. Reload. These headings are smaller, and they don't look like the final projects. That's because we haven't added any styling. So don't worry about that. It's not going to look right until we actually add the style, because the style is what makes the web page. Alright, so we have Table 1 and Table 2. Now, if you go into the parts folder, you'll find a file called tables.html. Let's open that up. And there's two tables here. We actually have the headings there too. We don't want to grab the headings, we just want the table. So let's just copy the first table, start tag to end tag, and replace the Table 1 comment. Now I'm going to explain the table syntax a little bit, because it's a little more than what we discussed earlier on the PowerPoint. So we have a opening table tag, and I have a border of 1. Actually, let me save this and show you. And this is what the table looks like. And it has a border of 1. Now, in the PowerPoint, I didn't explain that the head, body, footer tags of the table. We have a head tag, a T head tag, and then we have, just like any other row, we have TR, which is the row, but then we have the TH, which stands for table heading. If you're using a heading, you use TH instead of TD, and you'll see over here the heading is more prominent and it's centered, and that's default styling in Google Chrome. And you can also have a footer, and one thing that messes some people up sometimes is that if you have a footer, you have to add it right under the head. You can't add it at the bottom like you would think. So if we would have a footer, we would have to, let me just copy this so I can, we would have to have T foot right here, which can be extremely confusing, because you have, after the T head, you have the T body, and you would think that the foot would go under the body, but it doesn't. It has to go there. So I'll just save that and we'll reload, and you'll see the footer is also styled like the header. So what I'd like to do now is add some content. We should add the content first and then the styling. So if we go to the page that we're creating, you'll actually see this long, ugly line across the screen. This is actually this line right here, this horizontal line. So I'm actually going to remove that for now. I'm just going to delete the HR tag and save, and now that line's gone. So let's start adding some content. And what I've done, as I said, everything's in comments, so I'm just going to replace the comments with the actual code. So you'll see the first thing we have is the heading. In this heading, I'm gonna transfer back and forth between these two pages, the finished one and the one we're working on, just so we can use this as a reference. So we have Boston Developers is the heading, and that's an H4 tag. So we're going to replace the comment with the H4 tag, and in the middle we're going to write Boston Developers, and save that, reload. Now you'll see it's not the same size of the final page because we haven't added any style yet. So don't pay attention to anything like that, because it's not going to look right until we add the style. And what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to add the next heading, which is another H4 tag, and it's New Hampshire Developers. Save that. We reload, we'll see that heading. Now I want to get the tables. Now what I've done is I've added the tables into a separate file so that you can grab it, because there's a lot of typing here. I'm not going to type out all of this. So I'm going to grab the, let's see, and it's in this folder, the part folder. You'll see a file called tables.html, and I have table 1 is labeled with a comment, and then you scroll down and we have table 2. Table 1 is Boston, table 2 is New Hampshire. Alright, so now we're just going to grab the entire thing, copy it from the first table tag to the last one, and copy. And then we're going to paste that, and we're going to replace the comment that says table 1. And then we'll save, reload, and here you'll see the table. Now I've given this a border of 1 just so we can separate each cell, and we actually have something that wasn't on the PowerPoint, which is we're using a T-head tag and a T-body tag. And what the head does is makes the text of the heading more prominent, and it also centers the text on the Chrome browser. It's going to be similar no matter what browser you use, but that's if you want to use a heading. You don't have to. And then instead of the TD, the table data tag, we have the TH for table heading. And then if you're going to use a heading, then you're most likely going to use a body, so we have T-body next. And then we just wrap everything else in the T-body that's not in the heading. And this is all what we discussed in the PowerPoint: the table rows, table data, table cells, columns, sorry, whatever you want to call them. So that's the first table. Now let's go back and get the next table. Copy that and scroll down, paste it right here, paste. Okay, now I'm going to save, Control S, and we have the next table. So you can see we're getting there. Now what I'd like to do is add the lists. So we actually have 2 lists over here. We have an ordered list which has the numbers, and then we have an unordered list, which has bullets. I actually don't have the lists in a file, but I'm gonna put them in a file before I finish the series, so you'll have them. So just go into the list.html and just copy and paste. I'm just gonna get it from the finished file. So you would have a file called lists.html. I'm just gonna go to the finished file and grab them. Yeah, okay. So we get the order. I'm just gonna grab everything. Both headings, both lists. Copy. Paste. Okay, now I'm going to save, Control S, reload, and you'll see we have the list down here. Now remember, we haven't added any styling, so we don't have any floats. Here the lists are floated. The right div is floated to the right. So anything we put in here, any code we write that's not styled, it's just going to go straight down. And that looks like we have all the content. Let me just double check with the done file, and you'll see we have styling in the finished file, which we're going to add now if I got it all, and it looks like I did. Alright, let me get rid of this. Alright, so one thing I want to mention is we're gonna style this. But I want to mention, in this tutorial, we're going to use an inline div style, just like this, the body and the head. And that's not the optimal way to do it. I'm just doing this for the sake of simplicity for this tutorial. In the next chapter, when we really dig into CSS, we're going to start using classes and IDs. We're going to have an external style sheet. This isn't the way you would want to do it. It's just it looks messy, but it's easier to understand to explain. So bear with me if it looks a little messy. So the first thing, we have the body and the heading styled. Now I'm going to style the main div, and the main div is just going to have a width value. So we're just going to do style equals width. And the width is going to be 730 pixels. Okay, and then I'm going to save, reload, and you'll see the line shortened. The line reaches out to 730 pixels that we just defined. So this is the main div right now. Now the next thing we want to style is the next div, which is the left div. So like I said, we're going to use inline style. The next chapter we'll be doing, class equals left div, and then we'll create a style sheet. But we're not going to do that right yet. So we're just going to do style. Now what do we want for style for the left div? Let me see. Okay, this is the left div right here, and we want to create a width of 500 pixels. And bear with my typing. I probably have the typing of a 6th grader. Alright, so we have the 500 pixels, and obviously we want to float it because we want this left div on the left, so we want to do a float left. And let me just save this and see what it looks like. So you'll see it's taking shape where it's floated. We get the width down. Now the next thing I want to do is add some padding. And it doesn't look like we need padding yet right here, but we will. I'm going to add a little spacing between the left and right divs. I'm going to put 20 pixels between there. So I'm going to do padding right 20 20 pixels. Save, reload, and you'll see it pushed over a little bit. Okay, so next, let me just check. Oh, so yeah, what I want to do is I want to get rid of this border one for now. I'm going to give the table, both tables, a width of 500. So if you're using inline like this, we're not using style, we're using pure HTML to do this, so it's just width equals 500. We don't even need to add pixels. So save. And you'll see for now we have no border. The reason I took the HTML border off is I'm going to use CSS for the border. So I'm also going to do this to the next table. So I'll just copy this, go to the next table, and just do the same thing. Okay, save. Now I'll reload, and we can see that the table is stretched out more. Okay, next, let's see. Next, I'm actually going to add the borders now. Now, let me try to explain this. We don't want to just put a border. If we just put a style border here for just the table, what we're going to get is just one border around the whole thing. We want to add a border to the data, the table data, and we don't want it all the way around because that'll just look horrible. So what I want to do is add just a bottom border to each TD cell. So under each name here, and in the city and the skills, we'll have a border. And since I want to put a border on the TD, now if we're going to do this how we've been doing it and do style, border, I'm going to have to do every single tag. I'm going to have to do the style to all of these. So I'm going to show you a different way to do this. I'm going to add a style tag in the head. So we just want to do style and then add a closing style tag. And in this area we can define all our CSS. This is the same idea as if we were used to an external style sheet. So if we have classes and IDs, we can actually style them up here. Now what I'm going to style is the TD. So I'm going to indent, and I'm just going to write TD, and then open curly braces, close curly braces. Now in between here we can define anything to style the TD. So if I want to do, let's just say color black, this should change the text color. You'll see all the TD, all the table data is now black. Now we don't want it to be black, so I'm going to save that. Now what we want to add here is a border, and we don't want to just do border because that'll do all around the table data. We want to do border bottom. Now I'm going to do the shorthand here. Remember I talked about this in an earlier tutorial. We can just add the pixels. Let me just show you. I'll just actually, you know what? Yeah. I don't want to take up too much time for this video. So we're going to put the width of the border, which is 1 pixel we want, and I'm going to put the type, which is going to be dashed. Now we could have solid, dotted, there's a couple others, but we're going to have a 1 pixel dashed border, and it's going to be white, which is hexadecimal 6 Fs. Okay, now I'm going to save, go over here and reload, and there's our borders. Now this looks a little squished here. If you look at our final page, we have more space, so we're going to put some padding. I'm just going to do padding 5 pixels around everything. I mean around the entire TD. So we'll save, and there's the spacing. Looks a lot better. Just that simple little line, you know, it makes it look a lot better. Alright, so let's look at our final page, and we'll notice that the heading, the H4, actually, you know what? We said H4 here. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be H3. So let's change the H4s to H3. You know what it is these over here, I think, yeah, they're H4s. So we want to change the Boston and the New Hampshire headings to H3. Save, reload, and now they're bigger. But they're still different. We want to have this background color, and we want the padding. So I'm going to do the same thing that I just did for the TD tags, but I'm going to do it for the H3. So I'm going to go back up into the style block, and I'm just going to put H3, open, close curly braces, and I'm going to add a background color of 265-8A9. 8A9. And save, reload. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Huh. What? 1 second. Oh. Alright, sorry about that. Let's move this over here. Alright. So save that, reload, and now we have the background color, but we need the padding. You'll see we got padding on this. So we're just going to, actually, wait a minute, did I add the padding? Oh, this is the, alright, so we're just going to add 5 pixels padding. Save, reload, and now we have the padding. So you'll see our tables have taken shape. Alright, so next we have the right div along with the lists inside that div. So we're going to go down to right div start, and we want to, first thing we want to do is set a width. Okay, so we're going to use CSS. We're going to do style width, and we're going to say 180 pixels, and then we're going to float it. Obviously we're going to float it to the right, and let's save that and take a look. Let me got the parentheses, save, and you'll see now it's nice and neat. So we're just about there. The next thing we want to do for the right div is we want to add some padding. Actually, let me do the background color. We're going to get this black, this dark gray color. So in the same div, we want to do background. I also should mention that in the first section, I showed you the background color property. Background color. This is the dark green, the 333. Save, reload, and you'll see the background. Now we don't need to use this color word. We don't need that, which I usually do not use. We can just have background. Save, and it's the same thing. So saves you a little bit of typing. And what do we want to do now? Now we want a little padding in here, because see, you can see the headings are flush up against the edge. We don't want that. We're going to add padding, and actually we want padding on the right and the left, but not the top and the bottom, because that has enough space. So we could do padding right. We could do this, padding right 10, padding left 10, but we're going to do the shorthand. And the shorthand, we're just going to do just padding, and then let me see if I can remember the order. It's top, right, bottom, left. So any of these, we want to do just the right and the left. So this is the top, this is the right. So I'm going to style this, what was it, 10? Yeah, 10 pixels on the right. That's bottom, this is left. 10 pixels on the left. Put the semicolon. Alright, so, oh actually, hold on, I got an error here. I get the sorry about that. Okay, save. Let's reload. We should have some padding on the sides. Alright, so the final thing we want to do to this div is give it a top margin. We don't want it connected to the header like that. So we want to bring it down. So we want to do a margin top. And we want to do 20 pixels. Okay, save. Reload. Now we have that pushed down. I think that's it. I think we're there. Yeah. Yep. Same exact thing. So that's tables and lists and some CSS. Next chapter we'll be getting into. One second. We're going to be getting into HTML forms and input on the next video. So stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to chapter 2. In chapter 2 we're going to be talking about cascading style sheets, otherwise known as CSS. We have 4 different parts to this chapter. We have section 1, which will just be a basics presentation, a slideshow presentation. I just want you to get down the basic syntax of CSS. And in section 2 we'll start our project. We're going to be doing we're going to continue on our Blue Web Developer Directory project. We're going to design the home page. We're going to separate blocks of code and style them via external style sheets. And we'll be looking at more CSS selectors and styling, and finally we'll be looking at the new CSS3 features, and we'll also be working with background images. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and CSS is a style sheet language. It's not a markup or a programming language. It's a style sheet language that is basically used to separate the design from the design and the formatting from the markup or the content of the document. The CSS specifications are maintained by the W3C Worldwide Consortium, and like I said, we've been doing it inline. The reason you want to have an external style sheets, there's a couple reasons. One is it's just good to separate. It's always good to separate presentation from any kind of content or logic or anything like that. And another thing is it takes the weight, it lowers the file size of the HTML document. It's just a much more efficient and cleaner way to do it. Alright, so you need to link an external style sheet to an HTML document in order for the document to see the CSS. And it's very easy to do. I have an example right here, and it's very important that this be placed in the head tag of the document. The attributes here, rel, href, they can all be in any order that you want. The type attribute isn't needed, but I would definitely suggest that you use it. So we have a link tag, and it's just the link points something else, another file, to the HTML document. And we have the rel tag, and we just want to put style sheet inside of the rel tag. And next we want to add the link we want to link the file. So if you have the CSS file in the same folder or area as the HTML document, here you would only need to put file.css or whatever you named it .css. If you have it, in most cases it's in a CSS folder. It's in a folder that's actually named CSS, so it would be css/file.css. And the type just tells it that it's text and it's CSS. This could also be text JavaScript if you were using JavaScript. I would definitely suggest the type attribute. And then here we just have an example of what it would look like in a real web page. We have the head tags. You can see that it's in the head, and then the body continues. So that's how you link a style sheet to a document. Alright guys, so the div and the span elements are used in CSS to separate a certain block of code or a certain element so you can apply your own style to it. Div and span have no specific meaning, and what that means is, say you have an H1 tag. If whatever you put in the middle of the H1 tags is going to be a heading, and the text will increase and it does something to the code. Now if you just put a plain div or a plain span around anything, it's not going to change anything about that element or that code. You're the one who's going to define that. You're going to give the style to it. So it's used for custom styling, really. And the main difference between these two, div and span, is that div is a block level element and span is an inline level element. So if you have a div, it's going to automatically put lines on on the top and the bottom. It's going to separate onto a new line. Span is inline, which means you could put a span tag next to anything and it will run alongside of it, as opposed to put it on a new line. And the ID and class attributes are usually what you would use with the div and span. So you could label that certain block or that certain element that you want to style. So here I have an example of header and, of ID and class. We would have the header code here, which would be an H1 tag or whatever, maybe an image, and we would give a div with an ID of header, so we could actually style it using that ID in the style sheet, which I'll show you on the next slide. And a div, or any element for that matter, can only have one ID. It can have many classes. So here I have a class of space, and maybe you have space defined as a class that's going to add a space under it. You might have margin or padding under it, so you could apply that class to this. And you could also apply any other class by just spacing it out, and then just say another class, and then you'd have two classes around this object. You'd have space and another class. So yeah, that's the main difference between IDs and class. And the syntax is a little different in the CSS style sheet, which I'll show you next. So this is how you would use the CSS in the CSS file. And we're going to look at this part first, and this is from the HTML file. We define our ID and class. Like I said, you can have anything in here. Let's just say maybe there's like a heading and an image, maybe a logo, and we wrap that in a div tag, and we applied the ID of header, and we have two classes of space and another class. Now that on its own is going to do absolutely nothing to the code inside. We have to go to the CSS file that we linked a few slides back. We had, I think it was file.css, and in that file we want to open it, and we want to add our ID and classes in there. Now the most important thing to know about IDs and classes is that an ID uses a £, and a class uses a period. That's pretty much the only thing that is different. The styling is the exact same. You just always want to remember an ID is £, and a space is a period. So inside the header, we gave it the styling of width of 800 pixels. So whatever's in here is going to be 800 pixels long, and height of 100 pixels, so it'll be 100 pixels high, and then the background of black, this is the hexadecimal for black, and that means that everything within these tags is going to have a background color of black. Now we have the class, because we also added a class of space, so we took that class and we just applied a margin to the bottom of the div, and we just applied a margin of 10 pixels. So whatever's in here would have under it would have a margin of 10 pixels, and that's where I got the name space. It'll add a space to whatever we add that class to. And we don't just have to use this class here. we could add it to anything. We could have a sidebar, and we could add a class of space to that, and it would do the same thing. So we're not limited to just one block of code. So I'd like to stop here for now. I think we definitely have the core knowledge of CSS and HTML to actually start our project. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll start our project, and I'll give more explanation during the creation of our. So for this project, we're going to build a contact form for the website that we'll be building, Blue Developer Directory. And it's a form that implements all the tags that we've talked about. We have the input tags, text tags, we have the radio buttons, drop down, and checkboxes, and of course the button. And this is going to be part of the main site that we'll be building in section 5. In section 5 I want to talk about CSS more in depth using external style sheets and so forth. So what we're going to do now is, if you go into the section 4 project files, you'll see a done folder and a parts folder. And the contact form done.html is this here that you see here. What we're going to do is go into the parts folder and the page body HTML, grab that, copy it, and open a new file, paste it, and I'm going to save it as index.html. And you won't have this file in your folder. You can go along with the video and create it in the project files folder. Alright, so if we open that, you gotta open it with Chrome. And you don't need to use Chrome, you could use Firefox, IE, whatever you use. And you'll see we have the base layout, the design, we have the header, we have a heading for contact us, and then we have a paragraph. And if you look into the index HTML or page body, whatever you're using, you'll see we have some comments, and we have a comment that says form here. This is where we're going to put the form. Now we do have just the form HTML right here in form.html, but I'm actually going to go through it and type a little bit just so you can really get down the syntax. I think it'll be more helpful than just pasting the entire thing. So we're going to do that now. And the first thing we need to add is the opening form tag and then the close form tag. Now this itself isn't going to do much. We need a processor for the form, and like I said before, that's not going to be HTML. It's going to be maybe PHP or another type of language that can actually process the form. But we are going to add the action attribute, which would point to that file. I'm just going to make up a file and say process.php. So that's the action attribute. Next we need the method, and the method, like I said before, we're not going to get into this. This is more server-side stuff. I'm just going to put post. Now in the form is where we'll put all our input tags. And what I'd like to do is, if we go back to the done deal, you'll see we have these are labels, the full name, email address. And what we do is we connect these labels to these forms through a label tag. So what I'm going to do here is do an open label tag and a closed label tag. And in between that, we're going to do, we're going to do full name. And the label gets an attribute which is called for. And that's going to match the input field's name. So we're going to call this name to reference the full name input. And right under the label, now the label is inline. It's not a block. So if we can put stuff right after it. So if we, for instance, type test and save, and we reload, you'll see test comes right after full name. If label was a block element, then test would be on the next line. And that's what we want. We want the input to be on the same line as the label. So now we're going to do input type. Your inputs always need a type, and ours is going to be a text box, so just text. Now here we want to do the name. We want the name element, the name attribute, to be name, just like above, just like the label for element. Now the input tag doesn't need a closing tag. This is all we have to do. If this was XHTML, we'd have to add this slash, but this isn't XHTML, so we're not going to do that. So I'm going to save, and if we reload, we'll see we have the input form. The input field, sorry. And I actually want to wrap every label input combination inside a paragraph, just to add some style and some spacing. I'm actually going to move this over, so each input will be in a paragraph tag with its label. So next we're going to do our paragraph tags. And next, let me just see, we're going to do an email address field. So we want to do label for, and we'll call this just email, and we'll say email address, close the label, and now we want the same thing. Input type will be text, and name will match the label and be email. Now you can do some validation. We can do validation with JavaScript, and we can actually do validation using HTML5, but we're not going to look at that in this section. We're going to do that in a later chapter. So we're not going to validate our fields. It's just we just want to display the form for now. And next, I just want to do one more input, one more text field. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to change this to phone. And it's going to be text and phone. Alright, so that's going to be it for the text field. So I'm going to save this and reload, and you'll see we have our 3 text fields. The next thing I want to do is going to be the radio buttons, best time to call. I'm going to have 3 options. So I'm going to open a paragraph, because we're going to put every field in paragraph tags, not just the text. And what I want to do here is do the label, just like above. And it's going to be for, we're going to call it call. And in between the label tags, we're just going to write best time to call. Depending on what editor you have, like for instance Dreamweaver, if you open a label tag and then you type in the whatever in between, and then you start to close it, it'll actually put the label tag there for you, because it saw that you opened the tag, so it'll actually close it automatically. Notepad++ doesn't have features like that, but you can get editors that will help you code like that. But for now, it's actually good that you actually type it out just while you're learning. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do an input tag, just like above, but it's going to type radio. And next we're going to name it. We're going to do call. The name will associate it with the label, which has for call. So this will be name call. And let's see, we want to give this option, this radio button, a value, and we're gonna do morning for this value, for this particular button. And yeah, we're just gonna do that for now, and I'll save it and reload. Oh, one thing I forgot is to actually write morning. save. And what I'm going to do here is, let me see, what do we got here? You'll see we have this spacing here between the labels and the input. We're going to do that in a minute. So right now it's going to look all squished together and it doesn't look very good, but we're going to do the styling after. So next, let's just copy this, paste it, paste that, and now we just need to change the values, the value and the text. So here we'll have afternoon, and then afternoon, and change this to evening, change that, evening. Alright, so now we'll save it, reload. Now we have our three options. Now if someone goes to the page and you want to pre-select one of these, we can do that pretty easily. And you do that by, you go to the input tag that you want to be checked when they first go to the page, and you just put in the text checked. So I'll save that, and then we'll go to this page again, and you'll see morning is checked. Yeah, I could actually, just to demonstrate, I'll put it here, save, and now if we reload, afternoon is pre-checked. So that's a pretty nice feature that you probably use quite a bit with radio buttons. I'm just going to keep the first one checked. Alright, so next, what are we doing next? Next we're going to do the budget field, and it's going to be a drop down with some pre-filled options. So once again, we'll do the paragraph tags, and here the select list drop down isn't actually an input tag, it's a select tag. So we're going to do select, and oh sorry, we got to do the label first. So I'm just going to copy this just to move things along, and we'll call this, what is this going to be called? Budget. So now we can do our select, and we're going to do select type. It's going to be list, and name is going to be budget to match the label field, and that should be it. Now let's just close. Select tags you do need to close, and in between the select tags you have the option tags. And for the option, we're going to use a value attribute, and for this we're going to say 100 to 500. Now we're going to close the option tag, and in between that will be the text that the user is going to see. So we'll do 500 to, I'm sorry, 100 to 500. Now let's just save this, reload, and you'll see we have the drop down with one value. What I'd like to do here is actually create an option above it and just do select one and close the option. This will make sure that we don't have any value pre-selected. So you'll see we have select one, and then they can choose. And I'm just going to paste in the rest of the options just to save some time. So I'll reload, and now we have all our options. Alright guys, so now we got one more input field we want to put in this form. So let's go to the original, and the last thing we need to do is add these services needed checkboxes. I actually have these in a table. We have three rows, and 2 columns. So I'm not going to type all that in. I'm just going to copy and paste it, just to save some time because we're getting a little late in the video. So I'm just going to paste it, and I'll go over it real quick. We have the paragraph tags, the label, and we have a table with the 3 rows and 2 columns each. And inside the columns, we just have an input with a type of checkbox. The name is services, which actually I'm sorry, this shouldn't be call, this should be services. So now this label is attached to all these checkboxes. And then we have the value, and then what the user sees. So that's, well, now we have to add the button. We have one more. We have the submit inquiry button, and I'm going to, hold on a second, where'd that paragraph come from? Alright, so I'm just going to give a new set of paragraphs, and I'm going to add the button, which is an input. It's going to be input type, and it's going to be submit. And the name, I'm just going to say submit. Now, we want to put a value here, because the value is what you'll see, this submit inquiry. First of all, let me go over to our page, and let's do value equals, we'll just say submit form. Okay. Just check this real quick. Alright, so I'll save, reload. There's our table of checkboxes, and we have the submit form button. So the table is complete. The form is complete. I just wanted to add 1 or 2 things here. I want to get this away from the edge. It looks a little smushed on the edge, so what I want to do is move that over, and that is the main div right here. We have one main div, which is around everything down here in the body. And I want to add a style, and I just want to do a padding left. We'll just say 10 pixels. Save, reload, and now it's not up against the edge. The next thing I want to do a style is to move this. I want the labels to all be the same length, because these input boxes, they should all line up. This doesn't look very good. So what I'm going to do is do some styling in the head section. I believe I did this in an earlier chapter. I'm just going to add the style tags, and then we can do our styling in here. And what I want is I want to take the labels, so I'm just going to write label, and then we can put all the styling for the label inside here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to display an inline block so that they can be on the same level, and then I just want to give a width. I'm just going to say a width of 150 for all the labels. So I'll save that, reload, and that looks much better. Everything's lined up. All the tables are 150 pixels wide, so I think we're pretty much there. Like I said, the next section we're going to be doing some CSS, some style sheets, and just making the site come. Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 2. In Chapter 2 we're going to be talking about cascading style sheets, otherwise known as CSS. We have 4 different parts to this chapter. We have Section 1, which will just be a basics presentation, a slideshow presentation. I just want you to get down the basic syntax of CSS. And in Section 2, we'll start our project. We're going to be we're going to continue on our Blue Web Developer Directory project. We're going to design the home page. We're going to separate blocks of code and style them via external style sheets. And we'll be looking at more CSS selectors and styling. And finally, we'll be looking at the new CSS3 features, and we'll also be working with background images. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and CSS is a style sheet language. It's not a markup or a programming language. It's a style sheet language that is basically used to separate the design from the design and the formatting from the markup or the content of the document. The CSS specifications are maintained by the W3C Worldwide Consortium, And like I said, we've been doing it inline. The reason you want to have an external style sheets, there's a couple reasons. One is it's just good to separate. It's always good to separate presentation from any kind of content or logic or anything like that. And another thing is it takes the weight, it lowers the file size of the HTML document. It's just a much more efficient and cleaner way to do it. Alright, so you need to link an external style sheet to an HTML document in order for the document to see the CSS. And it's very easy to do. I have an example right here, and it's very important that this be placed in the head tag of the document. The attributes here, rel, href, they can all be in any order that you want. The type attribute isn't needed, but I would definitely suggest that you use it. So we have a link tag, and it's just the link points something else, another file, to the HTML document. And we have the rel tag, and we just want to put style sheet inside of the rel tag. And next we want to add the link we want to link the file. So if you have the CSS file in the same folder or area as the HTML document, here you would only need to put file.css or whatever you named it .css. If you have it, in most cases it's in a CSS folder. It's in a folder that's actually named CSS, so it would be css/file.css. And the type just tells it that it's a text and it's CSS. This could also be text JavaScript if you were using JavaScript. I would definitely suggest the type attribute. And then here we just have an example of what it would look like in a real web page. We have the head tags. You can see that it's in the head, and then the body continues. So that's how you link a style sheet to a document. Alright guys, so the div and the span elements are used in CSS to separate a certain block of code or a certain element, so you can apply your own style to it. Div and span have no specific meaning, and what that means is, say you have an H1 tag. If whatever you put in the middle of the H1 tags is going to be a heading, and the text will increase and it does something to the code. Now if you just put a plain div or a plain span around anything, it's not going to change anything about that element or that code. You're the one who's going to define that. You're going to give the style to it. So it's used for custom styling, really. And the main difference between these two, div and span, is that div is a block level element and span is an inline level element. So if you have a div, it's going to automatically put lines on on the top and the bottom. It's going to separate onto a new line. Span is inline, which means you could put a span tag next to anything and it will run alongside of it, as opposed to put it on a new line. And the ID and class attributes are usually what you would use with the div and span. So you could label that certain block or that certain element that you want to style. So here I have an example of header of ID and class. We would have the header code here, which would be an H1 tag or whatever, maybe an image, and we would give a div with an ID of header, so we could actually style it using that ID in the style sheet, which I'll show you on the next slide. And a div, or any element for that matter, can only have one ID. It can have many classes. So here I have a class of space, and maybe you have space defined as a class that's going to add a space under it. You might have margin or padding under it, so you could apply that class to this. And you could also apply any other class by just spacing it out, and then just say another class, and then you'd have two classes around this object. You'd have space and another class. So yeah, that's the main difference between IDs and class. And the syntax is a little different in the CSS style sheet, which I'll show you next. So this is how you would use the CSS in the CSS file. And we're going to look at this part first, and this is from the HTML file. we define our ID and class. Like I said, you can have anything in here. Let's just say maybe there's like a heading and an image, maybe a logo, and we wrap that in a div tag, and we applied the ID of header, and we have two classes of space and another class. Now that on its own is going to do absolutely nothing to the code inside. We have to go to the CSS file that we linked a few slides back. We had, I think it was file.css, and in that file we want to open it, and we want to add our ID and classes in there. Now the most important thing to know about IDs and classes is that an ID uses a £, and a class uses a period. That's pretty much the only thing that is different. The styling is the exact same. You just always want to remember an ID is £, and a space is a period. So inside the header, we gave it the styling of width of 800 pixels. So whatever's in here is going to be 800 pixels long, at height of 100 pixels, so it'll be 100 pixels high, and then the background of black, this is the hexadecimal for black, and that means that everything within these tags is going to have a background color of black. Now we have the class, because we also added a class of space, so we took that class and we just applied a margin to the bottom of the div, and we just applied a margin of 10 pixels. So whatever's in here would have under it would have a margin of 10 pixels. And that's where I got the name space. It'll add a space to whatever we add that class to. And we don't just have to use this class here. We could add it to anything. We could have a sidebar, and we could add a class of space to that, and it would do the same thing. So we're not limited to just one block of code. So I'd like to stop here for now. I think we definitely have the core knowledge of CSS and HTML to actually start our project. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll start our project, and I'll give more explanation during the creation of our. Alright, so in section 4 we're going to talk about basic web forms. Now HTML5 has some great new tags and other features when it comes to forms. Let's go over what a form syntax of a valid HTML. Okay, so what a form is and what it does. An HTML web form lets websites by allowing user input. So without forms, there's not actually talk to a website or to get feedback based on what we're looking for. Forms have front-end and back-end processing of the front end, and another language needs to take care of the back end. PHP, ASP, there's a number of server-side languages that'll process your form. HTML is used for a presentation and actually process the form. Now forms include a series of HTML tags and other elements. There's the text area tag, the select tag, and we're going to go over those in this section. The form tag, and like I said, wraps around the entire form. And the common attributes for a form tag would be the action. This would be an attribute of the form tag. It specifies the page or the script that was done on the server. This wouldn't be HTML. Just be to define whatever file was to process the form. Define that a process.php, and that would be a file on your server that processes the form. Now method is how the form gets processed. And I'm not going to go over this here because it's out of scope. For PHP, you have the get and the post method. The get would send the URL, and the post method would send it through. And you wouldn't be but that's something else. That's server side scripting. But these are the two most common attributes for a form tag. So next we have the input tag, and the input tag is one of the most form, and there's multiple different types. The first attribute would be text, password. It could be a checkbox, box, radio button, submit button. There's multiple different types of input. The next attribute we have here is one that would probably if the form was going to be processed somewhere else with PHP, it would have a name, and that name is by the element in the script that it's processed in. So it can also be used with JavaScript validation. It can be used for. Next we have the size, which will specify with the input field, usually a text field. It would define the width in 50 characters long. The attribute would be size 50. The maximum amount of characters allowed, and you can set this to 1 to 500. So these are the most common particular tag. So the input tag is not the only field you can use for user input. Text area is another. And a text area tag is a block of text, and this would be maybe a comments field or a message field on a contact form, which I'll be showing you in the project for this one. And the text area tag takes the name attribute just like the input and pretty much the rest of the input type. A rows and a calls attribute. By length, the number of lines, which would be the length, the rows, the text area, and the calls would specify the visible width, so it would be the number of vertical columns. Now we have the max length attribute, which is by the maximum number of characters allowed in the text area. This is just like for the input tag that we just talked about. So those are the basic attributes for the text area tag. Like the select tag is used for drop-down type fields. It's the single arrow that you click and select one, or it could be the kind where it's a list of options and you can hold shift or control and select multiple options. And it takes the name attribute and just all the other input fields, and be the kind of drop down where you can actually select more than one attribute. And it also has the size attribute, which would specify this would probably be used on the multiple type of drop down. You to pick maybe 2 out of the 5 options or something like that. So alright, so next we have the label tag, and the label tag is an element, but it's not a user input element. It's used to associate a input field. So you might have something like first name, and then maybe the input tag directly after it. And if you wrap that text in a label, it will associate that text input field. So if you click on the text, it'll actually highlight the input field that text belongs to. And it takes the 4 attributes, specify which form element the label is. This would match up with the input element's name attribute. The last form really is the field set tag. It's used different input fields. Here we have an example. You'll see we have the name field set. This is just the field set fields, and then you'd close it. And this would be the sports field set. So you'd add that whatever, it can be input boxes, check boxes, radio, and then by default your browser will most likely draw this border around it with set here. And as far as attributes, we have the name form field, the form, which would just specify why they have a disabled attribute, and this would just disable all field set. So now I think we're ready to dive into our project and implement all these form elements that we've talked about.